I think competence can kind of shift, right? Because competence can also mean conformity. So and it can mean imposition of values that are not necessarily right. So when you had the life of Trayvon Martin taken so violently and so unjustly, and then the conversation came around, well, why was he wearing a hoodie over his head? You know, and I think that's a really extreme example of where competence can go wrong. Because you're saying, well, here's this young person comes into the school or comes into the community center with the hat low, hoodie on, not looking at anyone, like, and you say, well, how do we develop more competence in that young person? Like, make eye contact, smile at people, take your hood off, take your hat off, right? But it's also putting, you know, certain values, like what is wrong with wearing a hat and a hoodie? And, you know, where is the gap there? Is the gap in that young person, or is the gap in the space that that young person doesn't feel comfortable and doesn't feel welcomed in most spaces he goes into, whether it's in a convenience store, a mall, on a bus, on the subway, you know, at the CNE, at Wonderland, like everywhere he goes, his smile is not returned. His gaze is not returned. His presence is questioned and challenged and not welcomed. And then you want to say, well, let's develop this competency in you and you know, have you dress more appropriately and smile more appropriately, make eye contact more appropriately. So I think that the context and cultural sensitivity as well, you know, like, oh, you should shake hands and shake hands firmly. But then in some contexts, say faith-based, you know, that's not gonna work for everybody. So I think that part I would really push back and say, yeah, competence is important, but not when it's, you know, cultural values and internalized racism and those kind of things are not being surfaced, and we're talking about developing competence in somebody as you need to get with the program, where that's not necessarily the case.